who we are as genetics. My name's Peter Xing. I work in tech and innovation at KPMG, and I'm the co-founder of Transhumanism Australia. So you must be wondering, what is transhumanism? So transhumanism, trying to differentiate ourselves from the LGBTI movement, we're about the transcending human biology through science and technology. Now, by looking at these three pillars, we look at super longevity, how do we live longer and healthier lives? Using super intelligence, how do we connect with technology to make us smarter? And super well-being, by how do we actually live healthier and happier, more fulfilling lives, not just longer and healthier lives. So this might sound like a superhero story, right? All the movies that you've seen out there in the blockbuster, but it's not quite far off because cyborgs are real. They are among us. You look around and you see, look, there's a Muay Thai fighter that actually got suspended for illegal titanium shin implants. Because imagine trying to fight this guy with the metal leg over there. And we have our real life transhumanists in Sydney. This is Meow Little Meow Meow, who implanted an opal card in his hand. And he's essentially got these superhuman powers that doesn't require a wallet or an opal card to get past your train stations. And you can see now there are implants everywhere. There's implants in our teeth, in our prosthetic hearts. There's actually a lot of pacemakers in knees and our hips. So we are already transhuman. And what's going to be really exciting is the next generation of Paralympics, because Tokyo 2022, you're going to actually see, 2020, you're going to see actually superhumans actually competing on the world stage. Now, transhumanism has actually garnered broad support. I think Forbes actually announced that it's official, the transhuman era has begun. Gartner actually published a dedicated section for these emerging technologies, and you can see that there it's the DIY biohacking. These are biochips, brain-computer interfaces, digital artificial tissue, and exoskeletons, and all these other emerging technologies which we'll talk to today. But on super longevity. Now, Ash mentioned that really, we are born, right, and then we grow up. The narrative goes that you just have some kids, and you're meant to just grow old and pass away. But from a scientific perspective, we are within the same physical laws as everything else in the universe. We're made up of atoms, and those atoms make up molecules. Those molecules make up cells, and stem cells are the fundamental building blocks of what makes us, us, and the genetic material and everything in our bodies. So these cells replicate through this replication of 300 million cells that are created and die every single minute. And you can imagine almost like a sort of a photocopier. And you have these cells that are being replicated all the time. It's taking that same copy and photocopying it again, and taking that copy and photo that copy again. And eventually, things just lose fidelity, because eventually you have errors building up in your cells. And these cells are called senescent cells. These are zombie cells that start damaging the cells next to them. And eventually what you have is, aging, the aging process and damage, wear and tear. Scientists have now used experiments on mice to essentially remove these senescent cells to get 30 to 40% increases in the healthy lifespan of these mice. There's other drugs like NAD+, which is a precursor to a new drug called NMN. These essentially remove the damage that's caused by the replication process. And it's kind of like fixing the photocopying machine, cleaning it out to make sure that there's no errors going forward. What you're also seeing in things like lab-grown implants, so you can actually create these lungs and implant them into pigs, and also grow human limbs, human organs in pigs and transplant that to humans. So they are replacement parts, so essentially getting those correction tape and taking it out on your documents. But what Ashley was talking earlier, the CRISPR-Cas9 technology in gene editing, this is the cut and paste tools to essentially having a digital copy of the book of life. And that means if we're able to fix things in the digital copy, then we can actually create the right copies going forward. Now, this is an explosion in the healthcare industry. It's a $3 trillion industry in the US, and you have CRISPR Therapeutics, Editas, Sangamo, and Intellia. These are companies, billion-dollar companies targeting these CRISPR technologies. And you mentioned those spit kits like 23andMe, that's already the early stages of what that's making democratized in the world. Nebula Genomics is looking at the privacy section of that. And then you have these life extension companies like Unity Biotech looking at these senescent cells, and Human Longevity Inc. is essentially trying to find all the patterns about your body and trying to fix it earlier on. So it's a very emergent field. There's also the longevity XPrize that's being drafted up. So XPrize is an incentive prize that's trying to get the government to adopt aging as a disease. So this is a $5 million prize being drafted by our colleagues over in Silicon Valley. So now in superintelligence. We already saw that in China they've created the first Chinese designer baby. So essentially editing the CCR5 gene to remove the potential to get HIV. But also, that same gene has potential to increase the intellect of those babies. So you can sort of see why we went down this path. And what we're seeing is that, look, China's already started, breeding these superhumans for sport. Look at Yao Ming, for example. And then there's also, these made-in-China babies. Imagine if you had a landing page where you can select what sort of traits you wanted. Blue eyes, higher intellect, longer legs, or taller and sort of look and feel. But essentially, that's the sort of the future we're moving towards. And now you can also have artificial wombs. In the next decade, scientists are predicting that we could have babies outside with being pregnant. So this is actually elevating, enhancing what humanity can do. In terms of the enhancements, we'll look at cochlear implants, for example. The disabled person might not be able to hear well, but with a cochlear implant, they can hear just as well as a human can. In the future, we'd be able to see this real-time translation. If you're a foreign country, it will feed in the foreign language in your ear. Or better, it can actually help you hear what's on the other side of the room, get those noise cancellations out, kind of like with extension of what your AirPods are currently doing. Now, we also do this for vision. This is the Magic Leap, and you can see sort of like the earlier versions on how to make this popular. There's some troll memes out there comparing that to a spider, but what Apple will be able to do next year on Apple glasses, that's actually going to be something that people will want to wear rather than just for the functions. And what that means is things like bionic eyes. You even have brain-to-brain communication using speech generation. This is the University of California in San Francisco, generating speech through a person's brain plans. And of course, there's Elon Musk's neural link. He's trying to create AI for the brain. So right now, we interact with our smartphones and tapping into the collective intelligence of humanity. But that input-output mechanism is quite slow. You still have to use your thumb, so you're essentially typing it in and out. What he wants to create is actually that integration between our brains and technology. So what that will mean is superintelligence, but also what does that mean to be an individual? How do you protect yourself from hacking? And as we have this sort of cold tech war between China and the US, us banning these technologies in China, does that mean we'll have a division in terms of the technologies we use? Will our brain-to-brain communications not work with someone in China? Will they develop their own stack of technologies? And that's what I wrote around the platform wars back in January, and it's still playing out today. So artificial intelligence, as you would know, it's accelerated at a rapid pace, and this is a graph showing the singularity in 2045. At this rate, extension of Moore's law to looking at different paradigms. So law of accelerating returns. Over time, in 2045, will surpass the combined human intelligence of everyone that's ever lived. And that's the sort of same as the physical singularity, where you go into a black hole and you don't really know what's going to happen. So this is sort of connecting our brains to AI would be potentially one of the ways to get there. And on super well-being. So who cares if we just have all this automation and AI around, but what does that mean for us? There are people being left behind. So Elon Musk is talking about free handouts that might be necessary. You got Bill Gates there talking about a tax on robots. And you got Andrew Yang, who's running as a Democrat in the United States on the platform of universal basic income, or essentially a citizen dividend, as a citizen of society, and paying tribute for the automations. What's that mean is that, well, this government should be stepping in to help us stay competitive. Essentially providing us these enhancements and staying relevant. Because how do you compete with AI in the future when you're still stuck with these biological limitations? So things like a full body haptic suit, bionic eyes, and all these neural implants, what is that something that should be provided to everyone and democratizing that and making that available? So what I'll leave you is what that means. We might be stuck in the matrix where you actually, what do you call it? You don't have to care about what's real and not real. Like if you have these virtual immersive realities, why not just stay in the matrix? What's the point? So this is where well-being is really sort of important, because how do you climb this sort of Maslow hierarchy of needs? We know about these sort of physiological needs. Technology is already filling in these spaces as they can. You got Uber Eats, for your food and shelter, and sex for Tinder, and safety for Airbnb and Amazon. You got 3D printing houses, where Amazon's achieved $20,000 3D printed homes that you can actually send out right now. With love and belonging, you've got your social networks where you're immersing yourselves in virtual reality, and these esteems that you get back from the likes and the comments and all these shares. These are sort of gathering up until you get to the self-actualization point, where you sort of find your purpose in life. And that's sort of where you're looking at, okay, well, what does that mean for the future of humanity? Or should we be exploring out to the stars? Or should we just immerse ourselves in the sort of neural link connected collective intelligence that is the self-transcendent side of things? So if you want to hear more about this, come to Singularity University. We'll be having a summit in October. We'll be talking about how these emerging technologies can impact the future of humanity. Thank you very much.